Princess Nova stepped through the airlock of the Unity station with measured, careful movements. Her blue-scaled hands gripped the ceremonial staff that marked her royal status among the Zelthran people. Behind her walked 6 heavily armed guards, their energy shields already activated and scanning for potential threats. This was how the Zelthran always traveled, with extreme caution and maximum protection. The space station floated in neutral territory between the Zelthran Empire and the Human Federation. For 3 years, their two civilizations had been locked in a cold war that threatened to become hot at any moment. Trade disputes had escalated into military buildups. Border skirmishes had claimed lives on both sides. Now, finally, both governments had agreed to peace talks. Nova had studied human behavior for months in preparation for this meeting. Her advisors had warned her that humans were unpredictable and reckless. They took risks that no sensible species would consider. They acted on emotion rather than careful calculation. The Zelthran Empire had survived for over 10,000 years by avoiding unnecessary risks and thinking through every possible outcome before taking action. Humans had barely existed for a fraction of that time, yet somehow they had spread across dozens of star systems with alarming speed. The Unity Station's main corridor bustled with activity. Traders from various species conducted business while automated security drones patrolled overhead. Nova noticed that most species traveled in groups with visible protection, just like her own people. But she also spotted several humans walking alone or in pairs, seemingly unconcerned about potential dangers. "Your Highness," said Commander Zek, the leader of her guard unit. "The human diplomat has requested a meeting location change." Nova's scaled brow furrowed. "A change? We agreed to meet in Conference Room Alpha. It has the best security protocols." "Yes, Your Highness. However, the human Ben Torres has requested to meet in Sector 7 instead." The princess felt her heart rate increase, a natural Zelthran response to unexpected information. "Sector 7? That area was damaged in the pirate attack last month. Why would he want to meet there?" Commander Zek's expression showed the same concern that Nova felt. "Our intelligence reports indicate that approximately 30% of Sector 7's structural integrity has been compromised. The environmental systems are functioning at minimal capacity. Most importantly, the security monitoring systems are offline due to the damage." Nova considered this information carefully. In Zelthran culture, changing plans at the last moment was considered extremely rude and potentially dangerous. Their ancestors had learned that sudden changes often led to disasters. Every successful Zelthran leader in history had succeeded through careful planning and avoiding unnecessary risks. Did he provide a reason for this unusual request? Nova asked. "He sent a message saying that important discussions require private spaces. He claims the other conference rooms have too much surveillance equipment." This made no sense to Nova. Surveillance equipment existed for safety and security. Why would anyone want to avoid it? Unless the human was planning something harmful. Her guards had briefed her on human unpredictability, but this seemed beyond normal human behavior. "Your Highness," Commander Zek continued, "I strongly recommend declining this request. Sector 7 presents multiple safety hazards. The damaged hull sections could fail at any time. The backup life support systems are untested. Most concerning, if something goes wrong, rescue teams would have difficulty reaching that location quickly." Nova nodded slowly. The commander's assessment matched her own thoughts perfectly. Any reasonable species would reject such a dangerous meeting location. She would send a polite message to Ben Torres explaining that they should meet in the originally planned conference room for everyone's safety. But then she remembered something from her studies of human culture. Humans often viewed risk-taking as a sign of courage and good faith. They respected leaders who were willing to face danger for important causes. Perhaps this unusual request was some kind of test of her character. Arrange a secure communication link with the human diplomat, Nova decided. "I want to speak with him directly before making a decision." A few minutes later, Ben Torres appeared on the holographic display in Nova's temporary quarters. He was a middle-aged human with gray hair and calm brown eyes. He wore the simple blue uniform of the Human Federation Diplomatic Corps, without any visible weapons or protective gear. Nova found this lack of protection deeply troubling. "Princess Nova, thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Ben said with a slight bow of respect. "I understand my request for a location change has caused some concern." Nova studied his face carefully. Zeltharan culture placed great importance on reading facial expressions and body language to detect deception. Ben Torres appeared relaxed and confident, showing no signs of nervousness or hidden intentions. "Mr. Torres, my security team has informed me that Sector 7 presents significant dangers. May I ask why you believe it is necessary to meet in such a hazardous location?" Ben's expression grew more serious. "Your Highness, I've been a diplomat for over 20 years. I've learned that the most important conversations happen when people can speak freely without worrying about who might be listening. Every conference room on this station is monitored by multiple intelligence agencies from both our governments and several neutral parties." This surprised Nova. She had assumed that diplomatic monitoring was normal and acceptable. Surely our governments have a right to know what is being discussed in peace negotiations. "They'll know the final results," Ben replied. "But the process of getting there requires honest conversation about difficult topics. If we're both worried about how our words might be interpreted by intelligence analysts, we'll never address the real issues causing this conflict." Nova found herself intrigued despite her concerns. "And you believe that meeting in a damaged, dangerous location will somehow improve our negotiations?" Ben smiled slightly. "I believe that when two people are willing to share risk for a common purpose, it creates trust. Trust is the foundation of any lasting peace agreement." The princess felt her mind racing through possible outcomes. This human was suggesting that they deliberately put themselves in danger to build trust. It was the opposite of everything she had been taught about leadership and diplomacy. Yet something about his calm confidence made her curious about his perspective. "Mr. Torres, are you aware of the specific hazards present in Sector 7? "Yes, Your Highness. I've reviewed the damage reports. Hull breaches in sections 7A through 7D, compromised structural supports throughout the main corridor. Backup life support only. No security monitoring. Emergency response time estimated at 12 minutes due to access difficulties." Nova stared at him in amazement. He had just listed every reason why the meeting location was completely unacceptable, yet he spoke about these dangers as if they were minor inconveniences. "And despite knowing these risks, you still wish to meet there?" "I don't wish to meet there, Your Highness. I need to meet there. The future of both our civilizations may depend on having one completely honest conversation without any outside interference." Commander Zek, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped forward. "Your Highness, I must advise against this course of action. The risk assessment indicates a 73% probability of at least one safety incident during a 2-hour meeting in Sector 7. Ben Torres heard the commander's assessment and nodded respectfully. "Commander, your concern for the princess's safety is admirable. However, I should point out that there's a much higher probability of a safety incident if our civilizations go to war because we couldn't reach a peace agreement." Nova felt something shift in her understanding. She had been thinking only about the immediate physical risks of meeting in Sector 7. Ben Torres was considering the much larger risks of failed diplomacy. This was still risk assessment, but on a completely different scale. "Mr. Torres," she said slowly, "in Zeltharan culture, we avoid unnecessary risks because they have led to disasters throughout our history. How do you determine which risks are worth taking?" "We ask ourselves what we're trying to protect," Ben replied. "If taking a small risk today prevents a much larger risk tomorrow, then it's not really a choice at all." Nova looked at her guards, all of whom showed clear disapproval of the proposed meeting location. Then she looked back at Ben Torres, who sat calmly waiting for her decision. He wasn't pressuring her or trying to manipulate her emotions. He had simply presented his reasoning and left the choice to her. For the first time in her life, Princess Nova found herself considering the possibility that avoiding all risks might actually be the most dangerous choice of all. Very well, Mr. Torres. I will meet you in Sector 7 in 1 hour. But I insist that we both bring basic emergency equipment. Ben Torres smiled. Of course, Your Highness. I'll see you there. After the communication ended, Commander Zek immediately began preparing emergency protocols. Nova watched her guards work with their usual efficiency while wondering if she had just made the wisest or most foolish decision of her diplomatic career. One thing was certain, she had never met anyone quite like Ben Torres. Princess Nova arrived at the entrance to Sector 7 exactly 1 hour later, accompanied by Commander Zek and 2 additional guards. The corridor leading into the damaged section looked worse than the reports had described. Twisted metal panels hung from the ceiling, and emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the walls. Warning signs in multiple languages cautioned visitors about structural instability and limited life support. Ben Torres was already waiting near the security checkpoint, reviewing documents on a portable tablet. He wore a basic emergency suit with a small oxygen tank and carried a simple medical kit. Nova noticed that he had chosen equipment for functionality rather than protection, very different from her own heavy-duty emergency gear that could survive nearly any crisis. Your Highness, Ben said, standing as she approached. Thank you for agreeing to meet here. I know this wasn't an easy decision for you or your security team. Commander Zek stepped forward, his scanner already active and checking the area for threats. Mr. Torres, my equipment detects multiple structural weaknesses throughout this sector. Are you certain this meeting is necessary? I understand your concerns, Commander, Ben replied calmly. But yes, this is necessary. Princess Nova and I need to discuss some very sensitive topics that could determine whether our peoples find peace or continue moving toward war. Nova studied the human diplomat's face as he spoke. There was no trace of fear or anxiety in his expression, despite standing in one of the most dangerous areas of the space station. She had expected him to show at least some concern about the obvious risks around them. Commander, you and the guards will wait here at the checkpoint, Nova decided. Mr. Torres and I will proceed alone to the meeting area. Your Highness, I must protest. Regulations require. The regulations were written for normal diplomatic meetings, Nova interrupted gently but firmly. This is clearly not a normal situation. Mr. Torres is right about the need for privacy in these discussions. As they walked deeper into Sector 7, Nova became increasingly aware of how damaged the station really was. Support beams showed stress fractures, and several wall panels had been removed entirely, revealing the complex systems underneath. The air recycling units made unusual humming sounds, and the gravity felt slightly unstable in some areas. Mr. Torres, may I ask you a personal question? Nova said as they navigated around a section where the floor had buckled upward. Of course, Your Highness. Are you not afraid of being in this dangerous place? My people would consider this situation extremely threatening. Ben paused to help her step over a damaged section of flooring. I suppose I am afraid, to some extent. But I've learned that fear is just information. It tells you to be careful and pay attention. It doesn't necessarily mean you should avoid taking action. This perspective fascinated Nova. In Zeltharan culture, fear was viewed as a warning to retreat and reassess. The idea of acknowledging fear but continuing forward was completely foreign to her experience. They reached a small meeting room that had been cleared of major debris but still showed obvious signs of damage. Ben activated a portable table and 2 chairs, then began setting out his negotiation materials. Nova noticed that he organized everything efficiently despite the unstable environment. Now then, Ben said, opening his tablet to display the preliminary peace agreement. I've reviewed the concerns that both our governments have raised. The main issues seem to be territorial boundaries, trade regulations, and resource-sharing agreements. Nova activated her own diplomatic materials and immediately felt more comfortable returning to familiar procedures. Yes, those are the primary areas of disagreement. However, there are also cultural misunderstandings that complicate every discussion. For the next hour, they worked through various proposals and counterproposals. Nova found herself impressed by Ben's knowledge of Zelthran culture and his willingness to consider alternatives to standard human approaches. He seemed genuinely interested in finding solutions that would work for both civilizations. The resource-sharing issue is particularly difficult, Nova explained. My people believe that careful conservation and long-term planning are essential for survival. Humans seem to prefer rapid development and immediate utilization of available resources. Ben nodded thoughtfully. That's a fair assessment. But perhaps we can find a middle ground. What if human efficiency and resource extraction was combined with Zelthran expertise in long-term planning? Both our peoples could benefit from that kind of cooperation. Nova was beginning to respond when the first explosion shook the entire station. The blast was powerful enough to throw both diplomats from their chairs. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the sector, and the lights flickered ominously. Nova felt her heart rate spike as her species' natural panic response activated. Every instinct told her to flee immediately and find safety. But Ben Torres did something that amazed her. He calmly stood up, checked to make sure she was uninjured, and then gathered up the scattered negotiation documents. That sounded like it came from the main docking bay, Ben said, consulting his tablet for a station schematic. Probably a fuel explosion or weapons accident. We should be safe here as long as the structural damage doesn't get worse. Nova stared at him in disbelief. Should be safe. Mr. Torres, we need to evacuate immediately. That explosion could have damaged the life support systems or compromised the hull integrity. You're absolutely right, Ben agreed, continuing to organize their materials. It could have done all those things. But evacuation might actually be more dangerous right now. The corridors we used to get here could be blocked by debris. The emergency response teams are probably focused on the explosion site. Our best option is to stay put and continue working while we wait for more information. Another explosion, smaller but closer, sent vibrations through the floor. Nova's panic response intensified. Everything in her genetic memory screamed at her to run away from danger as quickly as possible. Instead, she watched Ben calmly activate an emergency communication device. Unity Station Control, this is Ben Torres in Sector 7, Room 12. Princess Nova and I are secure and uninjured. Please advise on current station status. The response came through heavy static, Mr. Torres, we have multiple hull breaches in Sectors 4 and 5. Fuel storage explosion in the main docking bay. All personnel are advised to evacuate to emergency shelters immediately. Understood, Control. However, Sector 7 access routes may be compromised. We'll monitor the situation and evacuate when safe passage is confirmed. Nova couldn't believe what she was hearing. The station was telling them to evacuate, and Ben was essentially refusing. Mr. Torres, they just ordered us to evacuate. We have to leave now. Ben looked at her with calm, steady eyes. Your Highness, think about this logically. The explosions are in Sectors 4 and 5. We're in Sector 7. The most likely evacuation routes would take us toward the damaged areas. The safest thing we can do right now is stay here and continue our work. Continue our work. The station is being damaged by explosions. Yes, and that's exactly why our work is so important, Ben said, sitting back down at their portable table. Princess Nova, our two civilizations are like this space station right now. We have damage that's getting worse. We can either panic and make rushed decisions, or we can calmly work together to fix the problems. Nova felt her mind struggling to process this comparison. Ben Torres was using their current crisis as a metaphor for the larger political situation. Even while explosions rocked the station around them, he was thinking about the peace negotiations. A third explosion, much closer this time, caused part of the ceiling to collapse in the far corner of their room. Dust and debris filled the air, and Nova heard the hiss of escaping atmosphere somewhere nearby. Her Zeltharan instincts demanded immediate flight. But something about Ben's calm confidence made her pause. She watched him examine the collapsed ceiling section, calculate the structural implications, and then return to their negotiation materials. "Mr. Torres, I have to ask, are you not concerned about our immediate safety?" "I'm very concerned about our safety," Ben replied, pulling up a new document on his tablet. "But I'm more concerned about the safety of billions of people who will suffer if our civilizations go to war. Right now, this might be our only chance to reach an understanding without political interference." Nova realized that Ben Torres wasn't being reckless or ignoring the danger. He was making a calculated decision that their current mission was more important than their immediate comfort and safety. It was still risk assessment, but with a completely different set of priorities than she had ever considered. The station's emergency systems activated, and bright red warning lights began flashing throughout their room. An automated voice announced that Sector 7 would be sealed in 15 minutes to prevent atmosphere loss from spreading to other areas. "Well," Ben said with a slight smile, "I suppose that gives us a deadline to work with. Shall we focus on the territorial boundary issue? I think we can reach an agreement on that before they seal us in." Nova looked at this remarkable human who was discussing diplomatic details while their meeting room literally crumbled around them. For the first time, she began to understand what human bravery really meant. It wasn't about being unafraid. It was about being more afraid of failing than of facing danger. The sealing of Sector 7 happened exactly on schedule. Princess Nova watched through the small window as emergency barriers slid into place, cutting off their section of the station from the rest of Unity Station. Red warning lights continued flashing, and the automated systems announced that this area was now operating on backup life support with an estimated duration of 6 hours. Ben Torres looked up from his tablet where he had been typing notes about their territorial agreements. "Well, that gives us plenty of time to finish our work. I calculate we can complete the entire peace treaty framework before the rescue teams reach us." Nova stared at him in amazement. They were now completely cut off from the outside, trapped in a damaged section with limited air supply, and Ben was talking about completing their diplomatic mission. "Mr. Torres, should we not be more concerned about our rescue?" "The rescue teams know exactly where we are," Ben replied calmly. "Unity Station has excellent emergency protocols. They'll reach us within the next few hours. Until then, we have the perfect opportunity to finish what we started." Another tremor shook their room as something heavy collapsed elsewhere in Sector 7. Nova felt debris dust settling on her shoulders and noticed that one of the wall panels now showed stress cracks. The backup life support system made struggling sounds as it worked to maintain atmospheric pressure. "Your Highness," Ben said, looking directly at her, "I want you to understand something important. Right now, we have a chance to prevent a war that could destroy millions of lives. That opportunity is worth any personal risk we might face." Nova found herself studying this human diplomat with growing fascination. Throughout her life, she had been taught that wise leaders avoided unnecessary dangers and always prioritized their own survival. A dead leader could not protect their people. But Ben Torres seemed to operate by completely different principles. "In Zeltharan culture," Nova said slowly, "we believe that leaders must survive in order to serve their people. How can you help anyone if you are harmed or lost?" Ben smiled and continued working on his tablet. "That's true, Your Highness. But sometimes leaders must take risks to prevent much larger harms to their people. The question is not whether we face danger, but whether we face it for the right reasons." They worked together for another 2 hours, developing detailed proposals for trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and cultural exchange programs. Nova found herself impressed by Ben's ability to maintain focus despite their increasingly precarious situation. The air was getting thinner, and several more wall panels had developed cracks. When Ben's communication device crackled to life, they both looked up hopefully. "Mr. Torres, Princess Nova, this is Emergency Rescue Team Alpha. We have reached the outer barriers of Sector 7. However, the structural damage is worse than initially reported. We can only evacuate one person at a time due to access restrictions. Nova felt relief flood through her system. Rescue was finally coming. She began gathering her diplomatic materials and preparing to leave this dangerous place. But Ben Torres surprised her again. Rescue Team Alpha, this is Ben Torres. Princess Nova should be evacuated first. I'll wait here and continue working on our peace agreement documents. Nova stopped gathering her materials and stared at him. Mr. Torres, what are you doing? You should be the first to leave. You requested this dangerous meeting. Diplomatic protocol requires that visiting dignitaries be evacuated before host representatives, the rescue team leader announced over the communication system. Princess Nova, please prepare for extraction. Estimated time to reach you is 37 minutes. Ben nodded approvingly and returned to his tablet. Perfect. That gives me time to finish the final treaty language and transmit it to both our governments. Princess Nova, when you reach safety, you'll have complete documentation of everything we've agreed upon. Nova felt something profound shifting in her understanding of human behavior. Ben Torres was choosing to remain in danger so that she could reach safety first. More importantly, he was planning to use his additional time alone in this collapsing section to complete their diplomatic mission. Mr. Torres, I cannot accept this arrangement. We should both be evacuated together, or you should leave first. Your Highness, Ben said gently, this is not about protocol or politics. This is about making sure our work here accomplishes what it needs to accomplish. If something happens to these documents or to our agreements, then everything we've risked today will be meaningless. The rescue team's voice crackled through static. Princess Nova, we're beginning to cut through the first barrier. Please move to the corridor outside your meeting room. As Nova prepared to leave, she realized that Ben Torres was demonstrating something her people had never truly understood about humans. His bravery was not about being unafraid or taking pointless risks. It was about calculating which risks served the greater good and then accepting those risks without hesitation. Mr. Torres, she said, pausing at the doorway, why are you willing to do this? Ben looked up from his work and smiled. Because peace is more important than any one person, Your Highness. Including me. The evacuation process took exactly 37 minutes. Nova had to crawl through several partially collapsed passages while rescue workers cleared debris ahead of her. When she finally reached the safety of Sector 3, Commander Zek immediately surrounded her with medical personnel and security teams. Your Highness, are you injured? Do you require immediate medical attention? Commander Zek's relief was obvious in his voice. I am unharmed, Commander. But we must monitor Mr. Torres's situation carefully. He is completing essential diplomatic work while waiting for his own evacuation. Nova spent the next hour in the medical bay while doctors confirmed that she had suffered no serious injuries from her time in Sector 7. But her attention remained focused on the rescue operation. Through the station's communication system, she could hear updates on Ben Torres's situation. The backup life support in Sector 7 was failing faster than expected. The rescue team estimated another hour before they could reach Ben's location. The oxygen levels in his room were dropping to dangerous levels. Despite these worsening conditions, Ben Torres continued transmitting diplomatic documents to both the Human Federation and the Zelthran Empire. Nova received copies of territorial agreements, trade proposals, and cultural exchange protocols. Everything they had discussed was carefully documented and ready for government review. Rescue Team Alpha to Station Control, came the next update. We have reached Mr. Torres's location. Subject is conscious and responsive but showing signs of oxygen deprivation. Beginning immediate evacuation. Nova rushed to the medical bay where Ben would be brought for treatment. When the rescue team finally carried him through the airlock, he was pale and breathing heavily but still alert. The first thing he did was hand his tablet to Nova. Princess Nova, Ben said, his voice weak but steady, the complete treaty framework is ready for presentation to your government. I've also included my personal recommendations for implementation. Nova took the tablet with trembling hands. Even while suffering from oxygen deprivation and trapped in a collapsing section of the space station, Ben Torres had continued working on their peace agreement. He had used every available minute to advance their diplomatic mission. "Mr. Torres," she said softly, "I have never met anyone like you." Ben smiled as the medical team began checking his vital signs. "Your Highness, humans aren't fundamentally different from any other species. We just sometimes choose to take risks for things we believe are important." Over the following weeks, as Ben recovered from his ordeal, Nova worked tirelessly to present their peace treaty to the Zeltharan High Council. She told the story of their meeting in Sector 7 repeatedly, emphasizing Ben's extraordinary commitment to preventing war between their peoples. "Honored counselors," Nova addressed the assembled leaders of her civilization, "I have learned that human bravery is not about being reckless or ignoring danger. It is about accepting necessary risks to protect others and serve the greater good. This quality makes humans valuable allies rather than threats to be feared." The High Council was initially skeptical. Zeltharan culture valued caution and careful planning above all else. The idea of deliberately accepting risk seemed contrary to everything they believed about wise leadership. But Nova's detailed account of Ben's behavior during the crisis gradually changed their perspective. A leader who would sacrifice his own safety to complete a peace agreement was clearly committed to protecting innocent lives. A species that produced such leaders could be trusted as partners rather than feared as enemies. The peace treaty was approved unanimously. When Nova returned to Unity Station to participate in the formal signing ceremony, she made a special request to both governments. "I propose that Ben Torres be appointed as the permanent human ambassador to the Zeltharan Empire," she announced during the treaty signing. "His unique understanding of both diplomacy and sacrifice makes him ideally suited for building lasting cooperation between our civilizations." Ben Torres accepted the appointment and went on to serve as ambassador for over 15 years. Under his guidance, the Human Federation and Zeltharan Empire developed one of the strongest alliances in the galaxy. Trade flourished, cultural exchanges enriched both civilizations, and military cooperation prevented several potential conflicts with other hostile species. Years later, when young Zeltharan diplomats asked Nova about effective negotiation strategies, she always told them the story of her meeting with Ben Torres in Sector 7. "True diplomacy," she would explain, "requires leaders who are more afraid of failing to protect their people than they are of personal danger. Humans understand this principle better than most species. That is why they make such valuable allies and such effective peacemakers." Princess Nova had learned that human bravery was not about being fearless. It was about facing fear with purpose, accepting necessary risks for meaningful causes, and always remembering that some things are more important than individual survival. This lesson changed not only her own approach to leadership but the entire Zeltharan understanding of what it meant to be truly courageous.